Hello, and welcome back. This is Professor Hampson again. Anyone who's listening is doing so on their own accord now. Uh, took a week off, obviously, to grade papers, and now I'm back per the request of several students to record weekly recaps and put them on online. This week is purely on my own accord. I'm not in session right now, so I'm doing this because if people really do want to hear my thoughts, and I'm happy to provide them. Um, I didn't do as much research as I normally do because I'm busy. I've been busy, one, recovering from finals, and two, getting ready for the next semester. And there's a lot of administrative stuff I have to take care of in the interim, and see my family as well. But I did take some stories here. Probably won't be as long this week, but we start up the semester again in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and then I will, it'll be full force again. I'll try to do more this next week. But I did want to be true to my word and provide you with some weekly recap. And so let's talk about. Well, I'm going to be really mean to two different presidents right now. One thing I'm going to try to do in these as I practice over these next few weeks is to work on my diction and work on my slowing down. I know I talk fast, and I know there's problems with that, and I know sometimes my speech impediments get in the way. So I'm going to try really hard to make sure I pronunciate and I do things better. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always reach me through my school email or through these comments on YouTube now. So I hope someone's listening. I hope that you guys enjoy it. Um, I'm going to keep to my no bias policy, where I try really hard to keep an even keel and not favor one side or the other. And I'm going to keep very true to that this week by talking about both Trump and Obama in very negative fashions. Let's talk about Donald Trump. Donald Trump had a tweet this about last week saying that we should potentially delay the November election because of fears of mail-in voting and how they're unfair, and they're going to be, it's going to be corrupt and all these other various negative things. So there's two elements to this. One is delaying the election. Donald Trump has no power to do so, and that is up to Congress. And literally no one that I can think of in power thought that this was a good idea. Everyone just kind of rolled their eyes. The other element to this is that Donald Trump is sowing distrust to the election process, which is idiotic. It's idiotic for a variety of different reasons. One is that it's problematic because if people don't trust the elections, then that's going to potentially create violence, can create strife, can create a whole host of problems, especially with hardcore Trump supporters. If they don't see this as a valid election, then they're going to potentially do things that could be quite dangerous. And the same would apply to the flip side, right? If Biden so discontent here, then potentially his supporters could do something that's really nasty. Um, but there's a very fundamental problem with this, and is when you denigrate the validity of our electoral system, then you're going to denigrate our democracy, and that's very problematic. Now, is there any truth to what Donald Trump has claimed? On face value, it would probably appear that mail-in voting is less secure than in-person voting. The problem with that statement, though, is that it is actually quite secure. Um, Most states that I know of, each the states administer the elections, not the federal government, and so there is a bit of the federal government, are the ones being elected but the states control the election process, the election process. But so most states have, you get mail, you fill out a form, you sign a signature, you provide documentation that you really are who you are, a driver's license, an ID, a social security number, something like that. And then you provide a signature, and then then they mail you the ballot, then you sign that ballot, and then you mail it back. They do tests, they verify, they compare signatures, they use algorithms to do all these different things. And so these are relatively secure. The idea that there's mass voter fraud is not something that's a real concern. Is there fraud? Absolutely, but a very small cases, right? I think in Nevada, we had instances of several people trying to vote twice and things like that. They got caught, and so in terms of the security, they're quite secure. The other fundamental problem with such statements is that is that it's oftentimes Republicans who are the ones administrating the elections. It's the Republican Secretary of States. In Nevada, it was Adam Laxalt. Um, Adam Laxalt. In for example, in Washington, NPR had their Secretary of State on, and she's a Republican. And so the idea that Republicans are going to set up a system that's not going to help their own candidate or their own party is kind of ridiculous. And the other element too is that you can audit the votes. Like there's independent commissions, all these different things you can do. You can access public records, right? You can audit what's been done, and the minority party can audit. So the idea that there's this mass voter fraud is completely fallacious. The other issue too, that I think is most ironic here, is that Donald Trump established a commission back when he became president to investigate election fraud. He quietly disbanded that commission. He can investigate it alone. He has the ability to do so, and he chooses not to do so. So the idea that there's this mass voter fraud going on, that there's going to be mass voter fraud, is completely ridiculous. Is it possible? Certainly it's possible. But it's the idea is that it's just, but is it plausible? Absolutely not. Now, why is Donald Trump doing this? Some would argue that he's trying to sow a reason for his his potentially not being elected in November. I don't see it that way. I don't think he's that he's not that forward thinking enough, or he's not that tactical, or doesn't have the tactical mindset to do so. I think he legitimately believes this. I think that Donald Trump tends to just speak his mind, and he says, he thinks, well, this appears to not be a safe way of electing people. Therefore, I'm going to tweet this thing. I don't think he thinks far enough ahead to think about what he's doing, or that this is going to then undercut the elections into 2020 that I might lose. I don't think he has that ability to do so. I'm going to skip to actually my second last point now, because I want to offer equal criticism. So Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, gave a eulogy to the congressman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. John Lewis. I'm sorry. It was former Congressman John Lewis. I knew it was John. I just blinked on. I want to say Lennon actually, but John Lewis. John. He passed away, and he gave a eulogy. And in that eulogy, Barack Obama floated the idea that we should end the filibuster. That too is idiotic, and that is dumb. That is stupid, because that would give the majority party all the power. If the Republicans or Democrats controlled all levels of government, the minority party would have no say, and you would truly have a tyranny of the majority. And that is terrifying. That is an anathema to our system of government, where we have things should move slow, and you have buy-ins from all different parts. This is stupid. This is dumb. This is dangerous. I would argue that Barack Obama's statements are more dangerous than something that Donald Trump makes. Donald Trump is divisive, and people ignore him quite a bit because it's just what Trump says. He doesn't really mean it, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. People listen to Barack Obama, and there's a cult of personality around him, and I don't understand the cult of I understand it, but I don't agree with it, and I don't agree with the cult of personality around Donald Trump. Barack Obama abused the power of the presidency. DACA is an extremely problematic program, not because of the substance, but because of the way he implemented it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So Barack Obama also used drones to kill American citizens, all these different things. He pushed the boundaries of what the president can do, but people love him for that. And I think that's extremely dangerous. And I have a real problem with that. And the fact that he's floating the idea that we change the Senate rules because he can't get the policies he wanted, or he thinks should be done, is something that is dangerous, and that should not be floated around. I'm extremely critical of such statements. In the same way, I'm extremely critical of Donald Trump for undercutting our election, the trust in our elections. They're both stupid, they're both idiotic, and they both should be criticized for that, if I can be bold. Okay, so I'm gonna should throw equal hate to both presidents because they deserve equal hate and they deserve equal criticism. I thought about actually writing an op-ed, um, but to the Washington Post or New York Times, but the chances of me actually getting it published are relatively slim. And then I think I'm probably too late. It's probably too late for you to get something published. You got to really act fast, and they're not gonna publish an adjunct professor from the College of Southern Nevada. Moving on, the employment benefits are set to expire. They actually have expired at this point, and Congress could not kind of reach an agreement. The Republicans want something, the Democrats want something, and ultimately the American people are going to suffer. Should they do this? And from an economic standpoint, absolutely. Part of the problem is the government has forced a shutdown, and this is not as if this is just a normal downturn, and so you can't, people, if for many of you, or I don't know, the three of you that are listening to me, but many of my former students are out of work not by choice, but because they literally can't work. They're not allowed to work, and so normatively, the government should provide some type of assistance because they're the ones that are shutting this down. From an economic standpoint, from Keynesian standpoint, yes, they should provide some type of relief because the economy is just going to crumble then. The Republicans have a legitimate concern, however, with the debt. We're massively increasing the debt. But in the Keynesian sense, that's what you're supposed to do. As I said in the course, the problem is that we never pay it down. And we're going to have to eventually do that. The other issue we're going to encounter here is the Republicans want protections, liability protection. And I think at some level that's actually, we kind of roll our eyes, oh, they can't sue people. I think that's actually very legitimate based upon what little we know about COVID-19. Um, you look at the casinos right now. If someone gets sick, you know, did they get, where did they get sick and how did they get sick? Are they liable for that? And if everyone's going to get sued by someone who unfortunately gets sick and passes away, that's just going to wreck the economy just as much. So I think there's some level, but then again, if you're a nursing home and you're not doing your job or you're being grossly negligent, you don't want to protect those people. So I can see both sides of it, but I think those protections are somewhat needed. And the debt concern is also a very legitimate concern. But then again, you can't, people are going to, I mean, if you look at the ripple effect it's going to have on the economy, it's going to be massive. And so I think next week you'll see, or this upcoming week, you'll see Congress get together and they will pass something. They're going to have to. Now, I think what they should do, there was an economist on NPR and they pointed out that, part of the problem is, people who didn't need the stimulus got the stimulus, right? And then that's a real problem. And so, if they do another round of stimulus, it probably should be more targeted. The reason why it wasn't targeted last time is they didn't have time to really target it. They needed to pass this bill really, really fast. But also extending the unemployment benefits is absolutely going to be needed. Okay. Biden's running mate, Joe Biden actually released a racial equality plan this week. His talk about his running mate. There's some criticism about how long he's been taking to do this, how he's pitting people against one another. I think one of the women who's in the running, I can't remember her last name. Monster starts with a B. I can't remember. Let me look it up real quick. I'm sorry, her name is Karen Bass. I'm sorry. I mean, whenever I stop, I pause and I look this up. Karen Bass is her name. I want to say Bash, and so I said. And she's a congresswoman, and there are some things I mean, I guess this past week there were some issues with her. Some of the things she had said. She had spoken in front of a Scientology opening, and people criticized her for that. I thought that was relatively silly. Her explanation was actually quite sound. It was she said that this is my district and I spoke at an opening of a religious institution. That's actually fairly reasonable, right? The more troubling thing for her is I think she went to Cuba with a left-wing organization in the 1970s, and she actually met or saw Castro speak. That's much more troubling. It's troubling because it's a very um, divisive thing within the United States. You know, it is a communist regime. She did go there. It's very left leaning. Then makes her look more left leaning. The other issue is that the Cuban vote in Florida, that's going to be divisive there. Um, and the other person thrown around was Kamala Harris. Um, I don't know how much that gains Joe Biden. I don't know how divisive she is. I think he would do better to pick a southerner or someone from a more conservative state than California. When you have someone from, if you pick a New Yorker or someone from, a very liberal state, you're going to further, drive the perception of them that him being a left leaning candidate, and he's not. He's very moderate. So I think a southern woman, a southern, I think he's looking for someone a person of color, which is they're all fine things to look for. Um, but I think he would do better to pick someone who is not from a quite liberal state. Because his goal is to be as middle of the road as possible to to take some of the people who would normally vote for Donald Trump away from Trump. Okay, moving on. Big tech was on Capitol Hill. Facebook, Amazon, I think Google was on Capitol Hill. I think it was last semester, the spring semester, that when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying. I think I joked that he should hire me to give his responses because, man, he gives bad responses. But they're met because they're considered a monopoly, or they're under investigation for monopoly. And there's some truth to that. If you look at Google, Google, in terms of search volume, amounts for about 2/3 of the internet traffic, and their competitor being in Yahoo or minuscule. Facebook is, in terms of social media, a juggernaut. They own WhatsApp and Instagram. And how much competition do they really have? And that's a legitimate question, especially when they control messaging and commerce. Amazon is a massive juggernaut, and so there's a legitimate question about them being monopolies. And so, what do we do about that? Do we break them up? There's things I don't know the answer to that question. And Facebook, the big tech giants are a favorite punching bag of both the left and the right for different reasons. And so, how much of this was just political grandstanding versus substantive substantive criticism? I don't really know, but I think it's going to take quite a bit for them to want to break up Google or Amazon or Facebook. But I mean, there are legitimate concerns with them, both the left and the right, about messaging and their ability to control information and use that information. And so it is a legitimate concern. Portland, the federal it's interesting how this has been described. I've heard various people call them federal troops. They're not troops, they're federal officers. And it's a semantic way of describing them, and as if a military force. And I was talking to a professor, one of my friends, good friends of mine, Dr. Nate Jones, who's a professor at Sam Houston State in Texas, and we were talking about this. I gave him a call, and he's one of my dearest friends, and one of the people I respect most as an academic. Nate's immensely smart professor. But as I can talk him up for a second, he's a professor of Homeland Security, and he teaches. He talks about he researches drug cartels. Fascinating research. But I was talking about my friend Nate, Dr. Jones, if you want to like Indiana Jones. But I was talking to Dr. Jones, and he we're talking about these protests, and the federal response was very troubling at one level, right? You have, and I pointed out to him is that if you're the federal troop, federal officer, as I use the own verbiage I was or adjectives I was criticizing the people about. If you're a federal officer and you're potentially going to be doxxed, or you have violence done against you, people are throwing things at you, people are shining lasers in your eyes, right? Then more aggressive tactics are warranted, right? If you are in a marked car, people potentially could surround your car. if they surround your car and start throwing things at your car, what can you use then to extricate yourself from that situation? If it becomes life threatening, what do you do? And can you imagine having to shoot a protester as a federal officer? How would that be viewed? And so there's legitimate reasons for their tactics they're using. Then again, you know, these are quite troubling because of due process, because of transparency, all these different things are very much a problem. We're not trying to denigrate that. But my point was that there's two sides to this that have legitimate viewpoints. And, you know, were these officers needed? I mean, yes and no, right? You know, if people are vandalizing federal property, that is a crime. And to sit there and allow it to happen is, you know, is not a good thing in one respect, right? It says, oh, you can absolutely do this. Sending a strong response could be necessary, right? Is one way you can do so. And, you know, but then again, you know, when as federal officers were there, that stoked tensions, that stoked people to want to protest and protest violently. And so, you know, as the federal officers leave, then they can, you know, things can become more peaceful. You know, then again, why wasn't the city doing more to protect federal property? It's not their job, but then again, they complain that there's the federal officers there. And so I think you have a situation where you can fault both sides, both the city, the state, and the federal government for creating this situation. Um, and so, and I think the tactics are troubling, but then again, they need to be from a perspective of officer safety. That makes actually a little bit of sense. And so, what do we take away from this? I don't really know, actually. I think it's a complicated situation, and Trump is about sending a message that he's the one that ordered this type of action. And I think at one level, yes, it absolutely it's federal property. You can't allow vandalism. You can't allow these statues. You know, you shouldn't allow these statues to be torn down. There's a process for that if you want to do that. But then again, you don't, you know, to use this tactics they do sends a very negative message. So, you know, to take what you will from that, and you know, I'll leave it there. Lastly, DACA. One of my favorite things to talk about. I've been very transparent about my frustration with DACA as a policy, not because of the substance. Remember, I don't think the substance of the policy is necessarily necessarily bad. I actually think it's a wonderful policy, right? I think DACA recipients, people who were childhood rivals who we were taken here on, they didn't choose to come, their parents did. I think it's a perfectly fine policy. My my concern has always been in the way it's been passed and the way it was implemented. And the Trump administration lost a ruling and said you can't just end it, you have to give a reason, which is absolutely true. But now the Trump administration has stopped new applications, and they reduced the how long how long a approval was for, right? So it used to be you get a 2-year window and then you get a reply, and people can reapply, and they reduced it to 1 year. Now the the reason they can do that is because it was an executive order that created it. And so they can change the policy within reason at whim. There's no congressional oversight here, which is one of the fundamental problems with the way that Barack Obama created the policy. And so you can criticize, Donald Trump did this. He can criticize as much as you want. He's the one that built it. He's the one that created a faulty policy. And so I'm going to be very, very critical of that. I think this is a fundamental problematic policy. And so, is this a good thing? I mean, it's neither good nor bad. He has the ability to do so. Now, I think the thought process is that he's, after November, he's probably going to end the policy, which I think he will, whether he's president or not. And he can do that as long as he follows the rules by which you end a policy or you end something like that. He absolutely can. Remember, DACA is still under threat from the courts. There's lawsuits against it for exactly the way it was passed. So it's really up to Congress, and this is just punted. Now Congress doesn't have to deal with it, and they really should have. And I think that's extremely problematic. And I'm very very critical of the Obama administration. Again, not because it's a bad policy. I think it's a fantastic policy. I mean, personally, I think it's great, right? I don't think there's very many people who think, oh wow, we should send these people who have been here nearly their whole lives home, or to a country they've never really been to, never grew up in. I think there's very few people who are going to argue that point. And it goes back, when Trump floated a DACA deal, if he just got his wall funding, and the Democrats wouldn't give him that. In a way, it's a pyrrhic victory for the Democrats because he got his wall anyways. And so I don't see, with a push for not do this. And the only people who suffer are those who are DACA recipients. And I'm going to criticize, both parties and, really the Obama administration for creating this policy that, while substance is fine, is a nightmare in terms of presidential power and how you deal with it. So that's it for this week. I should have done more. I mean, Bill Barr's on Capitol Hill. There's a lot of other things, but I went 26 minutes, which I'm relatively surprised about. So, as always, if you have questions you want to ask me, that's fine. These upcoming weeks, I'll do a few more, and then I start the semester. I think the 20th or the 21st, and then there'll be a little more structured then. I think I probably went a little more angry this week and a little more. I don't think I gave my opinion too much, but I was probably more critical than I probably normally would have been if I was in the semester. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. Probably because I thought Trump and Obama were acting foolishly this week. But anyways, that's it for this week. Thank you very much. If you have questions or concerns, put them in the comments or just email me because you all have my email. Thank you very much.